It's beautiful now. There is rebirth, not only in our kitchen physically, but you can feel it in the volunteers who feel so supported by this. There is also changes in our congregation in terms of our having done a funeral last night. We don't do a lot of funerals in this church, which is a good thing, I guess. Again, one of my churches out west, they wanted to hang up a sign. They were so used to doing many, many funerals because the congregation was older. They were going to hang up a sign that had the number of days since the last funeral. Because at one point we went for a long stretch and they thought this would really sell our church in that area. 262 days since the last funeral. Come here, we're not dying. I just waited that. But a funeral is a time of transition for everyone. We're recognizing that one person, one soul, has left this place and gone on to the next part of their journey, but it's a transition also for the people sitting in the pews as they move from the greatest moment of shock through a time of gathering with others who loved the person they loved, and hopefully into the next stage of learning what the new normal of their life looks like. It's a transition also this morning because Bettina is going to become a member this morning, and we're so glad of that. We usually have a lot of new members join at once, but she's off to Kenya. And she wanted to go knowing that this was the spiritual community she had committed herself to before she left. It feels to me like a war bride or something, you know? The guy's leaving, you gotta get married now. We're happy to have you marrying into our congregation this morning. So it's a time of transition as we move through that funeral to new membership and new life. Of course, it's a time of transition as we look outside and see that it's spring. But it's also a time of transition when you read our annual report. I looked at the annual reports from very few years ago, and I saw a lot of hope there, and I saw tremendous courage and dedication there. I saw a lot of listening to the will of the Spirit there. But I also saw a lot of concern, a lot of uncertainty, not knowing if we would be here. And as I said in my part of the report, we have transitioned beyond not knowing to saying we are here, fully supported by God, so excited to see what the next part of this journey is. So a church, and this church, is a place of transition. And that's so important to remember. Because at its worst, the church has been a place of staying in the same place, standing still, not wanting to move into any kind of new ideas, new understanding of God, new revelation. That always astounded me when I was a child and sat in the Baptist church, and oh boy, if you want to see digging in your heels down as an art form, grow up Baptist, okay? At least in the church I was in. I know there are wonderful, wonderful Baptist churches. But really, we were taught that what the church was about was to look at the world as it was, not now, but maybe 50 years ago. Some dimly remembered, fondly thought of picture of what the world had been maybe 50 years ago. I don't think it was, but that we remembered. And to try to make that the reality today. It wasn't about moving forward in any way. In fact, it was about picking up a piece of the past which maybe didn't exist and trying to impose it on the present. So needless to say, when I became about 20 years old and realized that the reality I was taught in the church didn't serve me in the reality outside, that I didn't find what I needed as I transitioned and changed and became new, I left the church. The United Church of Canada is the only possible home for me, not only because I'm gay and a woman and a lot of places wouldn't ordain me for either of those. It's the perfect place for me because the United Church of Canada makes a statement about transition and about how transition and change and revelation of God is at the heart of what a church is. The United Church of Canada continually asks one question, one very important, difficult, life-changing question. And the question our church asks is, what does love look like now? What does love look like now? becoming new again and again and again alone. We are so blessed in this place. We have such vigorous, committed seekers. We have a room full of people every time we do a discussion group and every Sunday morning, full of people who want to be stretched, who know how hard rebirth is, who also know that whatever resources they need, God is going to give it to them. And God is often going to give it to them through the people who they gather and journey with. So when we look at our AGM reports today, we're going to see things about the roof. We're going to see things about money. We're going to see things about Christian education, Christian development. We're going to see all kinds of things that look like the business of the church. Embedded in each of those reports is a way in which God is recognizing where we are and saying to each of us, that's great that you made it this far. That's so good that you can love like you do now. It's wonderful that you've welcomed in the peace that you've got. But we're going to go further. We're going to do more. We're going to stretch ourselves. And you wait, because when we deliver the 2014 report, if you opened up to me and done the spiritual work and leaned on each other and understand that the point of church is to ask, what does love look like now? We're going to see that together and individually we've gone even further. I was in a church on Friday at a workshop, and above the door